In the wind-swept lands of 13th-century Scotland, where mist rolled over green valleys and stone castles rose like guardians of the past, a figure was born whose name would echo for centuries: William Wallace. His life was not one of privilege or kingship, but one marked by defiance, struggle, and an unshakable will to resist tyranny. To understand Wallace, one must first understand the Scotland into which he was born. Around 1270, Scotland was a proud but vulnerable nation. Its people were fiercely independent, but its politics fragile. When King Alexander III died suddenly in 1286, the kingdom was thrown into chaos. With no clear heir, rival factions vied for power. It was the perfect opportunity for the ambitious and ruthless Edward I of England, known as the Hammer of the Scots, to extend his dominance northward. Edward was not merely a king, he was a conqueror. He had subdued Wales, crushed rebellions, and now sought to bring Scotland under English control. To the Scots, this meant not just political rule, but the erosion of their very identity, traditions, and way of life. Heavy taxes, garrisons of English soldiers, and a reign of intimidation spread across the land. Amid this turmoil rose William Wallace. Unlike many of the noble-born leaders of the time, Wallace came from more humble origins, believed to be the son of a minor knight or landowner. He was not destined for a throne, nor for titles of great prestige. Yet within him burned something more powerful, a fierce independence, a refusal to kneel to foreign rule. Legends surround his early years. One tale tells of Wallace slaying an English sheriff in the town of Lanark after the killing of a woman he loved, an act that forced him into the life of an outlaw. Whether truth or myth, the story captured the imagination of the Scottish people. Wallace became the embodiment of resistance, a man who struck back when others remained silent, a warrior who carried the voice of his oppressed nation. Wallace was not merely strong in battle, he was clever. He understood that Scotland, fractured and outnumbered, could not defeat England through sheer force. Instead, he turned to guerrilla warfare. From the forests and the highlands, Wallace and his men would strike suddenly, ambushing English patrols, raiding supply lines, and vanishing before retaliation could come. His knowledge of the land, combined with his courage, made him a ghostly terror to English forces. But it was not only strategy that made him great. Wallace had the gift of inspiration. He could turn common farmers, shepherds, and townsmen into warriors. Men who had never held a sword stood at his side, united not by discipline or wealth, but by a shared desire for freedom. Where fear held others back, Wallace ignited defiance. This spirit came to its most glorious test in 1297, at the Battle of Stirling Bridge. The English, confident in their power, marched north with thousands of well-armed soldiers and cavalry. Their goal was to crush the rebellion once and for all. Wallace, alongside fellow leader Andrew Moray, faced them with an army far smaller and less equipped. By conventional standards, the Scots should have been obliterated. But Wallace refused to fight by convention. He and Moray devised a bold plan. They would not meet the English on open ground, where cavalry could dominate. Instead, they waited as the English attempted to cross the narrow wooden bridge over the River Forth. Only a small number of soldiers could pass at once. As the English advanced, Wallace unleashed his men with devastating precision. Trapped and unable to maneuver, the English were cut down mercilessly. The bridge itself became a death trap, its waters running red with blood. The impossible had happened. A poorly equipped Scottish force had annihilated one of the most powerful armies in Europe. Word of the victory spread like wildfire. To the Scots, Wallace became a national hero, a liberator, a living symbol of hope. To the English crown, he was no longer just a rebel. He was a threat that had to be crushed at any cost. Yet in this moment, standing triumphant on the banks of the River Forth, Wallace's legend was sealed. He had proven that courage, cunning, and the will of a people yearning for freedom could overcome even the mightiest empire. But this was only the beginning. For Edward I, the Hammer of the Scots, would not rest until Wallace was destroyed. And for Wallace, the path ahead would be one of sacrifice, betrayal, and ultimately martyrdom, a story that would define the spirit of Scotland forever. The victory at Stirling Bridge changed everything, yet it came at a cost. Andrew Moray, Wallace's crucial ally, was mortally wounded and would soon die. In the aftermath, Wallace's reputation soared. He was knighted and recognized as Guardian of Scotland, ruling in the name of the absent King John Balliol. For a brief moment, the impossible seemed within reach, a free Scotland, standing on its own feet. Wallace knew the English would return in force. To keep pressure off Scottish soil, he pushed the fight south. Through the winter of 1297 to 1298, he led raids into Northumberland and Cumberland, burning supply depots, breaking garrisons, and reminding England that Scotland would not kneel. These were not acts of cruelty for their own sake. They were the hard calculus of war, the work of a commander who understood that survival demanded striking first. By the summer of 1298, Edward I himself marched north at the head of a massive army, veteran knights, infantry, and a corps of longbowmen who had already proven devastating in Wales. Wallace chose to avoid open ground, favoring the tactics that had brought him victory: deny supplies, harass columns, draw the enemy deeper. But the English king pressed relentlessly, and when Scottish scouts failed to mask movements, a clash became inevitable. It came at Falkirk. Wallace arranged his men in great schiltrons, tight circles of spearmen, bristling like porcupines against cavalry. For a time, the formation held. English horse crashed onto a wall of wood and iron and fell back bloodied. But then came the arrows. The longbowmen advanced and rained shafts into the packed Scottish ranks. With shields scarce and the schiltrons pinned, English cavalry found the gaps. The line buckled, then broke. The field was lost. Wallace escaped with his life, but Falkirk, 1298, ended his tenure as guardian. He resigned the office, ceding leadership to others, Robert the Bruce and John Comyn among them, while he turned to a different kind of warfare: quiet, stubborn resistance. He moved like a shadow across the land, never entirely gone, never fully caught. Then came a new phase of the struggle: diplomacy. Wallace traveled abroad, seeking support from France and appealing to the papacy. He argued that Scotland's cause was not a rebellion, but a sovereign nation's right to self-rule. He did not return with an army, but he returned with legitimacy, and with the same unbroken will that had carried him from outlaw to legend. The English crown never stopped hunting him. Bounties were posted, informants were bought, and in 1305, betrayal found its mark. Wallace was captured near Roybroyston, reportedly through the actions of Sir John Menteith, a fellow Scot who chose England's favor over Scotland's rebel. Bound and guarded, Wallace was dragged south to London, not as a noble prisoner, but as an example. In Westminster Hall, he stood accused of treason and atrocities. Wallace's answer was simple: he could not be a traitor to a king to whom he had never sworn allegiance. It didn't matter. The sentence was already written. On August 23, 1305, he was hanged, drawn, and quartered at Smithfield. His head was placed on London Bridge, his limbs sent to key towns on the English-Scottish frontier as a grim warning. But warnings fade. Legends do not. In death, Wallace became larger than life. His stand taught Scotland that empires can bleed, and that the will of a people can outlast the iron of a king. Less than a decade later, Robert the Bruce would rally the nation and win at Bannockburn, 1314. A victory carried, in part, by the memory of the man who first proved that England could be defied. Today, the facts and the myths of William Wallace often intertwine. Yet the core remains: a leader who rose from obscurity, fought for a principle, and paid the ultimate price without surrender. He did not win every battle. He did not live to see independence. But he taught a nation to refuse the yoke, and that defiance reshaped history. He was, in truth, the rebel who shook an empire. If this story moved you, help it reach more people. Like this video, share it with friends who love epic history, and subscribe to Chronicles of the Valiant. Your support keeps these legends alive, and the next warrior's story is already on the way.